Well, greetings and shalom. This is Adrian Scott, and I welcome you to Truth and Testimony, the broadcast. It is time for some more shekels for your thoughts. Now, this is going to be an interesting one for me. The basic idea, and the idea of this started with this concept, and Ray and I, in a video that we put up not too long ago on the channel, we're kind of mentioning this a little bit, and it's this idea of hearing from the Lord. And so people say, the Lord told me this, and the Lord told me that. And I don't want to discount right away that that doesn't happen. I do believe it does happen. However, we've seen a lot of cases where when that does, when people are saying that it's happening, it's actually a hoax, or at worst, in some cases, even a scam, where they're trying to get something from you, often money, but it could be other things as well. But they're not legitimate. And it's unfortunate because now you're left in a guessing game of, well, which one's legit and which one's not. At least that's the situation I kind of find myself in. And so, as Ray and I were saying in this video, we're always very apprehensive about this idea of saying, the Lord told me this. Ray has said that there's been one or two occasions where he has heard a message from the Lord. And I absolutely believe him. Given the circumstances of what happened, it makes all sense that he would. Now, I was sitting there thinking about that for myself, and I would say both my wife and I are probably in a situation where we wouldn't say that we've really heard a lot from the Lord. Now, that's not to think or not to state that he isn't part of our lives, because the difference for us is what we've seen in our family is much more of an event, or much more of a situation of events unfolding in such a way that in our mind, it couldn't be anything but God at work in our lives. One example that I will give of that is when Kristen and I were getting involved with Autumn and Abigail, and we're kind of stepping in and taking a little more control there and becoming more functioning as parents to these girls. This is a process that was gradual. It happened over a period of time. At first, it was only intended to be for a month or two, and then it just kept getting extended and extended and extended. And eventually, it ended up with us being the permanent guardians to these two girls. Now, that process took a while to do this. Set that stage, but you need to know that before Autumn and Abigail were ever even a part of the picture for us, I had it, well, first off, Chris and I, we were living in a city in the mainland on the west coast of Canada, but we both were like, we don't like it here. We want to get out of this city. This doesn't feel right. We feel like we should be somewhere else. We didn't really know where else, but it was just really a strong feeling that was on both of us. And one of the thoughts that I'd had was a whole other long story here, but I wanted to spend more time with my father and with my brother, both of whom I had spent some time with, but not much, and I wanted to spend more. Now, at the time, they were living clear across Canada in Ontario, this almost the other side of the country. So I'm very fortunate in that I have a job that functions on a system of seniority, and you over a period of time, you earn extra perks and holidays and things like that. That it's a job that I can transfer anywhere in Canada where there's an office for this job and retain my seniority and the perks and advantages that I have with that job. So really, that's a great part of my job that I could do that. So I had a transfer in that I submitted to go to Ontario with this idea of being able to spend more time with my father and my brother. Now all of this stuff with the girls started, and I had to sort of reevaluate that. I still had my transfer submitted, but I wouldn't be able to do anything with it, and nothing was happening with it, more importantly. Now, come to find out that I guess the both of them kind of had enough of, you can get some pretty intense weather back east, and they just decided they'd had enough. So after doing a little bit of research, they ended up moving to Vancouver Island, which is where we're at now. But when I heard that, I changed my transfer request from Ontario to Vancouver Island. Still nothing happening, but I have this thing in. So the way that a transfer would work is I put in the request that I want to move, but I won't get that request until there's an open job position for me to fill. Then they'll say, hey, there's a position available. Do you want it? And I can accept or decline. But no offers were coming through. Sometimes it really can be the luck of the draw, whether you can get to a place or not. So this whole time, even before Autumn and Abby, I've got transfers in to leave this city that we're in and go elsewhere, none of which is happening. Now we introduce Autumn and Abigail, and we're in this process of doing this, and we can't move. We have to be there for meetings and for evaluations and for all this other stuff that's going on. So to try to make a long story shorter, we finally got the approval. It's a particular agreement that gave us permanent guardianship. Now it's done. It's official. Now we could move. Not even a week, just a couple of days after this paperwork was finalized and we had the ability to move, I get a transfer to Vancouver Island. The timing of that is phenomenal. I can't see, maybe someone could say, well, it was just coincidence. But the problem is that there's so many other things that have happened like that. They can't all be coincidences. So by our reckoning and our minds, no, this is God at work in our lives. And he may not have been directly saying things to us. The Lord told me to put in a transfer. The Lord told me to wait. Nothing like that. But that he was still moving in our lives and influencing us in how things happened. The fact of where we were and how all of these situations even led up for us to have Autumn and Abigail in the first place, I think is God's hand at work as well. But just everything that worked out for that. And then we've got multiple cases of financial things where we've had a mishap, we had an emergency come up, and now all of a sudden we're in the hole and we're not sure how we're going to pay bills, and we're a certain amount of money short for getting basic bills paid. And the next thing you know, boom, this windfall of money will show up, almost exactly the amount that we need to cover those bills. And that has happened multiple times. So I am utterly convinced that God is at work in our lives and moving in our lives and just setting a stage for his will to be done. And that scares me sometimes, that I or my wife or both of us have some sort of role or job to play in his plan, but we all do. It still can be intimidating to know that, yeah, he's watching. But anyway, so I mean, it's just stuff like that. And it's not so much directly hearing messages from him, but that we know that he's working in our lives. So that's our story with our connection to God. Having said all of that, and now this is where this is going to be a little bit of an awkward part of this video for me, is I did have what I believe was a vision at one point given to me by God. And I don't say that lightly, because I don't take any of that stuff for granted. I don't ever want to be standing before the judgment throne with him sitting there to me going, you said, I said, what? What did you say that I told you to do? Or anything like that. I don't want to be in that position. So I do take this stuff very seriously. But I really feel that this was a vision. I can't explain it any other way. So here it is. And just know that up to this point, up to right now, with you watching this, that I've told my wife and I have told Ray. That's the only two people I have ever told about this vision. So what the vision was was, okay, actually, I have to back up and set a little bit of backdrop. So we were very young believers when this happened. Keeping in mind that I was not a believer at all until what was about 35 years old when I gave my life to the Lord and I accepted and embraced him as my Savior. So yeah, 35 years old, most of my life being at best, I could say agnostic. I don't think I would ever describe myself as an atheist, because when I think back to when I was a lot younger, I always kind of had a sense that God was there. I just didn't want him involved in my life. I just was like, get out of my life. I don't want anything to do with you. So couldn't say an atheist, but prodigal son, agnostic. You could put whatever labels on it. But anyway, around it, I was not engaged at all with his word. I didn't have a Bible. I'd never seen a Bible. I'd certainly never read any part of a Bible. So that all kind of changed when I turned 35, or right around there. And at that time, we'd become believers. We'd given our lives over. And we started attending a church. Now, in our case, it was a Pentecostal church, part of the Pentecostal Assemblies of Canada. And there's some great people there, some of which we still consider friends, and talk to them on a semi-regular basis. But we were going to this church. Now, keep in mind that prior to that, so prior to 35 years old, I had no background with religion. I wasn't really a part of any church. I was not raised Christian or anything like that. Our family, historically, it kind of has its roots in the Catholic Church, but I'm not really aware of much of anyone that's practicing, other than possibly my grandmother. So I was not raised with any of that. Now, having said that, I mean, my mother didn't straight up shut the door on stuff like that, but it just was never anything that was really a part of my life. So when I became a believer, I was coming at it brand new, right? And the reason I say that is because I was not mired in any kind of tradition or locked into any particular way of thinking. It was all brand new thinking for me. And not knowing any better, I just started getting a Bible and reading it. And much like reading any other book, I start at the beginning and I work my way through to the end. But the problem was, as I'm reading the Bible, I'm reading things that didn't seem to be lining up with what our church was teaching us, what they were preaching to us. And this is not to say that we were immediately jumping on, oh, you're evil and this and that. No, we didn't know. So we started going to the deacons and the elders and the senior pastor and other pastors in the church and saying, I'm reading this, but you're saying this, and there seems to be a discrepancy. Can you tell me what I'm getting wrong? Like, what are we doing wrong here? And they would not, and maybe perhaps could not answer the questions, but at any rate, they didn't. And it just left both my wife and I, but I'm just speaking for me mostly, really in a place of being very discouraged and disheartened, and probably about as close as I've ever come to walking away from this newfound faith. Because it just, a lot of stuff not making sense to me. I'm trying to read it and understand what I'm reading, and I'm looking for some help, and I'm not getting it, and just feeling very, very discouraged. Discouraged would probably be the strongest word. And so that is the situation that we're in at the time that this vision occurs. So a very quick side note, our son who's special needs absolutely loved the worship band, who, by the way, were amazing. Some great musicians. And they had a nice stage set up, great sound. Being, music guys and stuff, totally pay attention to that. But because of that, our son always wanted to sit right up in the front row, to be as close to that band as he possibly could be. And so we're up there, first or second row in this church. And I don't think the band was playing at the time that this happened, but that's where we are. And the experience that I had was, I'm sitting there in this pew in this church. I think the pastor may have been in the middle of his sermon. And then all of a sudden, I felt like I was transported somewhere else. Maybe not physically, but consciously. that I was not there. I was not hearing the church. I was not aware of the people around me or anything like that. I was somewhere else. And where I was, maybe it was heaven. I couldn't say for sure. That would be my guess. But basically, it was very bright. It was like all light. And all I could see was this ocean of heads. I was just a little bit raised above everything. So yeah, just looking over this multitude of people, this as far as the eyes could see, just a huge amount of people. But it's not the visual that really stood out. Being there, the biggest things were I felt calm and good and at peace. It was one of the most amazing feelings I had ever experienced. And actually, I know I've often said that I've never directly heard from the Lord, but when I come to think about it in this vision, I did hear something, and it was a voice that said, very simple, everything is going to be all right. In a very tender tone. And after that, next thing I remember, I'm back sitting in this pew in this church. And it was not too long after that we kind of left the Pentecostal church and we moved on to other things. But it was the most remarkable thing I've ever felt. And it was that idea of just this calm peacefulness and this message of everything will be all right. And I mean everything, not just my situation of trying to understand the Bible, but everything will be all right. Not said, but I fill in the blank here to say, meaning like I've got everything under control. That's kind of the part I fill in myself. But what I heard was everything will be all right. And yeah, so there you go. I've never really shared that with anyone, and I think that was an oversight on my part. I should have, and I kind of dropped the ball on that one. But yeah, so I'm sharing it now. And if this has encouraged somebody or inspired somebody or just kind of re-energized you, I'm great. I would be tremendously grateful if that did happen, because it should be for the benefit of many, not just me. I mean, who am I in the grand scheme of things? But anyways, that is my one big event that did happen. And that is just, to this day, it's been, 35 or almost 20 years, 16, 17 years. And I still remember it almost like it happened yesterday. It has stuck with me that profoundly. It really did make a huge impact in my life. Anyways, I mean, so that's it. But having said that, yes, I had this vision, but I am not one ever, again, to say, oh, I had this vision, I had a dream, I was shown this, the Lord told me that. I don't like to do that. So I can tell you this right now. This is a promise from me, and I know Ray would say the same thing, so I can speak for him on this one. If we ever do hear something from the Lord, I want you to tell the people, we'll let you know. Okay? If we don't hear something abundantly, obviously message from the Lord, we're not going to pretend that we did. I can say that in all sincerity, and I know I can speak for Ray on that one too. So with that, it's just kind of an interesting idea. Don't discount everyone, because sometimes the Lord does speak to people, but use some discernment. And a great way to get that discernment, once again, is to be in that Bible. Read it. The better you know that word, the better prepared you are for the things you're going to be confronted with in our world today, which is still in the authority of Hasatan. That's going to change, but for the time being, that's where we're at. So with that being said, I thank you if you stuck with me to this point in the video. I thank you so much for joining me for this crazy ride on this channel. I never thought I'd be doing something like this, but I am, and I thank you for doing it with me. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with others. That's always one of the cores of what we're trying to do. And don't forget, if you have not done so, subscribe. All of those things help us to, well, first off, to motivate us to keep making these videos, but also help us to grow the channel and reach more people. The bigger the channel gets, the more likely other people will get references to things that we're doing. And it's not to say that, we hold all the absolute truth, but it's just if we can encourage someone, if we can inspire someone to pursue that relationship with our Heavenly Father, to spend that time in the Word learning about Him, and therefore just improving their own lives, that is a victory for us, whether we're right or wrong on stuff. Again, we think we're right. If we didn't, we wouldn't be making these videos. But I, speaking for myself, acknowledge that I don't know everything. I mean, I only kind of started reading this Bible at 35. Now, I've read it a lot, but, there's people that have been reading it a lot longer than I have. And, I defer to them on a lot of things. But anyways, with that being said, I do wish blessings to all of you in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach. And again, thanks for joining me on this ride. And I do say shalom and bye for now.